Want to know the key to sim racing? Well, the wait is over. I'm going to be giving you 4 weight transfer tips that will help you to become a faster sim racer on the track. So today we're going to be going through how to exploit the weight of your car to give you more grip on the road surface when you're sim racing. A good way to think about weight in a car is to break it down to basics and work out why the weight is moving around and why it's actually a positive thing for your driving. I've got about 4 different concepts I want to explain, and I'm not a physicist or a mathematician or smart at all. I just do a lot of racing, and these are some techniques and kind of theories that I've learnt that help me understand weight transfer. If I get it wrong, feel free to let me know. But this is what I find to help me visualize what's happening with the weight in a race car. So the first thing, and this is a little nerdy, but we're going to be starting with the equation for static friction. If you're unsure, this will help explain why we want weight over certain parts of the car and why that's a good thing. In reality, this is a lot more complicated as a car's actually moving, and there's a lot of different equations for moving friction and things like that. But we'll keep it super basic just to explain the general concept. So our static equation is F equals mu n. And F, to start with, is friction. Friction is good. The more friction we have, the more grip. And the more grip, the faster we can do everything. The faster we can slow down, the harder we can turn, and the faster we can accelerate. Mu in this equation is the friction coefficient. So this is the actual item making contact with the road, which in this case is our tire and the road itself. So the actual qualities of the tire, how soft it is, can impact this, as well as the quality of the road, if it's wet, if it's dry, things like that. And to get F, we're going to be timesing mu by N, and N is normal force. And normal force is essentially the ground pushing back up to meet the weight being pushed downwards towards the ground. Newton's third law is that everything has an equal and opposite reaction. And in this case, we have the load pushing the tire into the ground, and N is essentially the ground pushing back into the tire. So what does this mean? Well, basically, the higher that N is, so the higher the load, the heavier the tire is, which is the load being put into the tire, which is our weight. This is multiplied by mu, which gives us more friction. So the more weight that we're putting into our tire, the more grip we're going to be getting. Basically, this is a bit of a confusing equation to say, but if you're unsure of what weight transfer actually means in a car, this is a great way to show it and show why weight directly impacts how much grip each tire has. And you'll notice this when you drive. Wherever you move the weight is where you get the grip. If you're moving the weight onto the front right tire, if the weight goes onto it, it has way more grip than generally the unloaded left rear tire, which is unloaded and will have a lot less grip. So our next concept is also slightly confusing, but basically when you're driving on a track at a constant speed, your car should be nice and balanced with no weight movement. But the moment we accelerate, we turn, or we brake, an external force is now acting on the car. If we're accelerating, we're squatting the rear down hard over the back wheels and lifting the front into the air. And if we're braking, we're putting all the weight over the nose and lifting the rear into the air. When we're turning, the weight is thrown to the opposite direction of where we're turning. The turning one is probably the best example is if we're turning left. And as we turn left, the weight is being pushed to the right. And we're actually loading up the right-hand side tires. And back to our equation before, as they load up, the N value is rising, which gives us more friction, a higher F value, and means more grip. So as we turn left, the right-hand side corners are getting loaded, which gives us more grip to turn left, basically. The best way to see this is by jumping into a car, in this case a trophy truck, and driving at a straight line at an okay speed, but one where you're not generating huge aerodynamics or anything. And then start turning the wheel gently from side to side. You'll feel that you have a lot of grip as the wheels grip up and load up as you turn. But if you violently turn the wheel left and right, the car doesn't actually have enough time to load up the tires on either side. So the tires actually have less grip and the car will likely understeer. You'll see this technique in Formula One a lot, and it's actually a great way to warm up your front tires by generating a huge amount of slip angle into them. If you turn the wheel really hard to the left really quickly, you'll make it understeer, and that can heat up your front tires really quickly. The basic theory though is that the weight goes in the opposite direction of where we are trying to be. So if we're trying to go forwards, we're trying to accelerate, the weight is going to go backwards. When we're trying to turn right, the weight is going to go left, etc. The best way to feel this is when you're racing and getting on the brakes. Some cars, if you go to max brake pressure straight away, you can lock the brakes. It also teaches you to be smooth and make sure you're gently moving the weight around the car. If you're too violent moving the weight around, it won't give the car enough time to load up and means you're getting less grip. So our next concept is the traction circle, and I would think of the traction circle as a way of displaying your grip that's available in your car. We have this outer circle here, which is the limit of the grip that's available. Basically, if you go outside this outer circle, you don't have any more grip. This is when you start understeering or oversteering. Now, basically, when you brake, the grip goes up in the circle, and if you accelerate, the grip goes down to the bottom of the circle, and when you turn, the grip goes side to side. This is a visualization, and what the circle shows is basically you can only do so many things at once. You can't be 100% brake pressure and turning full left at the same time. Otherwise, you'll run out of grip. You'll actually go outside the outer circle, which means, you don't have enough grip to actually execute that maneuver. The traction circle is a wonderful way to show why we do certain techniques while driving, and if we're going to a corner, we're trying to be 100% brake to slow the car down as quickly as possible, which means we're braking in a straight line and we're going to right to the top of the traction circle. As we turn into the corner, ideally we want to be keeping our grip as close to this outer edge as possible, which means we can do another technique that I talk non-stop about, which is trail braking. I actually pretty much did an entire video on this technique, which you can watch up here. Up here. You can click on it. So back to the traction circle, we brake at 100%, and as we turn our car in, we slowly bring our brake pressure to 0 as we turn it in. The moment our car is made to set and we can commit to the exit, we slowly bring our throttle to 100% bit by bit while winding off the turn angle, keeping our grip as close to the edge of the circle as possible. As I've seen a lot of other driver coaches say, the main thing with the grip circle is keeping your grip as close to the outside as possible. Often, if you're a newer driver, the trace will look kind of like a star with just braking in a straight line, and then it will come back to the middle, and then it will go to the side for turning, back to the middle, and then down to the bottom for acceleration. But what you should be doing is just going around the outer edge, using all of the grip at the same time. And the grip circle can remind you to do that. Make sure to overlap your inputs, trail brake, and build the throttle on as you turn, kind of unturn the wheel, but only to a certain extent. So our fourth concept is managing your engine layout, and it's something that I talked about in my last video, but I've seen a lot of people in sim racing that don't actually fully understand the differences between the different engine layouts, and that's fair enough. It's actually pretty confusing. I used to play Gran Turismo for many years, and I was like, what's an FR car? What's an FF car? I don't understand. So with our weight distribution over a car, we generally want it to be as balanced as possible. Ideally, we would love a 50-50 weight transfer in a car with 50% over the front wheels and 50% over the rear wheels, perfectly balanced, and this allows us the most grip to go around corners. So the most common engine placements we have in sim racing are the front-engined rear-wheel drive car, the mid-engined rear-wheel drive car, and the rear-engined rear-wheel drive car. We also have the front-engined front-wheel drive car and your four-wheel drive cars, both front and mid-engined. I was actually thinking, making this video, why has no one made a rear-engined front-wheel drive car? But it turns out that somebody did in 1947, but it was pretty terrible. So there you go, random fact. Anyway, let's quickly get front-wheel drive cars out of the way. And these cars, normally in sim racing, you'll see them as TCR cars or BTCC cars. And in front-wheel drive cars, you have a lot of weight in the front, which means under braking, you have a huge amount of grip over your front tires, which generally gives you huge amounts of turn. When accelerating though, you're actually using your front tires for both turning the car and also applying the power. So it means you're hugely front limited under power and you'll get a lot of understeer when trying to accelerate. To counteract this, normally you'll see a front wheel drive car set up to have a huge amount of turn, and this often means that they're a little sketchy under brakes with a lot of oversteer. But that's a great thing. If you see a front wheel drive car and it's trying to kill you on brakes while you're going into the corner, that generally means it's set up pretty well. Now, next up is our front-engined rear-wheel drive cars, and in these, most of our grip is over the front wheels, which means these cars generally have pretty good steer turning into a corner. Often, since we have so much weight up front though, when we apply the power, we have less load over the rear wheels, which means less grip over the rear tires and wheel spin. An example of this car is like the V8 supercar, but also things like the BMW and the Mercedes GT3 cars. Very easy to get wheel spin in these cars. These cars tend to be really stable over bumps and over curbs though, so if you're racing at Imola or if you're racing at Bathurst or, I don't know, Gold Coast or something, this is a great car choice and engine layout to choose. Next is our amazing mid-engine cars, which have a more 50-50 weight distribution. And this is generally great, but in a lot of these cars under brakes, we actually lose some grip over our rear wheels. And these cars can end up being a little bit sketchy. They'll also often tend to understeer a little bit on power more than front engine cars, but it does depend on the actual car itself. The main advantage with a mid-engine car though is because we're using all four tires a little bit more evenly, we generally get fantastic mid-corner grip. So I love mid-engine cars at places when you have long corners and you can really kind of let the car rotate really nicely. So knowing these engine layouts is really important, and this means that you can tailor your car choice and your driving style to the track. If you're racing at a super smooth track like Spa with long flowing corners, I often like to pick a mid-engine car, something that will give you lots of turn and really allows you to get the nose in. You're not battling understeer on the way into a corner very often. Whilst if you're looking at a track with lots of bumps and curbs and you're struggling to get the car over the bumps or over the curbs, I would look at something with a front engine like a Mercedes or a BMW, something like that. Okay, so that was a lot of information about the weight in a race car and how it works. And a quick reminder again that I'm not smart at all. I'm not a physicist or into maths or anything. I just enjoy driving, and I've found a lot of these concepts can really help visualize what the weight's doing and why it's actually so important when racing. I hope it was useful, and I hope you can find some driving techniques to use as well when you're racing. And if you liked the video, give us a like. Definitely subscribe to Overtake for more sim racing and racing videos, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.